No Fronteiras do Pensamento de hoje, o escritor e jornalista Tom Wolfe discute as diversas transformações pelas quais o mundo tem passado. Acompanhe agora a primeira parte da conferência, O Espírito de Nossa Época.
Anyway, I was relieved to learn that the late unpleasantness on the stock markets did not hit Brazil nearly as hard as the United States. In the United States, we have the feeling that the world has now turned upside down. And there's a whole string of, I collect them. I now have 22 articles from respected journals about the end of advertising as we know it. It's all the end of as we know it. Now, I'll just give you an idea of some of the articles. There's one, the end of advertising as we know it. There's the end of banking as we know it. There's the end of book publishing as we know it. There's the end of Britain as we know it. There's the end of capitalism as we know it. There's the end of race as we know it. There's the end of stress as we know it. There's the end of television as we know it. There's the end of the United States of America as we know it. And there's one, the end, it just came out. It's called The End of the World as we know it. And last but not least, the end of Yahoo as we know it. So you can see, and I must say, I made one tiny contribution to the end of as we know it. I went to the first time in my life, I managed to wangle my way onto the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. My mission on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange had absolutely nothing to do with the economy, with money, with finance. There had been a fist fight, or more than a fist fight, between two wealthy brokers on the floor of the stock exchange. One had ended up bending the other one over a trading desk backwards and began to strangle him. Now, when at the last moment he realized, hey, wait a minute, I'm killing somebody. So he stopped. Now, this deadly fight was over the results of a football game. One was for the New York Giants, the other was for the Philadelphia Eagles. This subject I was there because this subject has so fascinated me over the years. How people can identify with sports teams. Particularly, I mean, I've done it myself, so I'm not pointing fingers. Particularly with teams that have absolutely, made up of players who have absolutely nothing to do with you and your people. The New York Yankees, I live in New York. The New York Yankees' greatest players, and most of the great players in baseball in the U.S., are Latin American. They're Dominicans, they're Colombians, but they're not from the United States. I don't get it. I've been trying to figure this out psychologically, and if anybody has some penetrating insights, later on, let me know. Now, while I was doing some reporting of this, I talked to one of the contestants in the battle. I saw this crowd gathering around a booth about 75 feet away. So I was curious, what on earth was this? And so I walked over, and it turned out to be the initial public offering of a hedge fund, so-called IPO, called Blackstone. Now, I had never heard of Blackstone. All of a sudden, a television reporter comes up to me with a microphone and says, Mr. Wolfe, what do you think of the Blackstone IPO? And I said, looks like the end of capitalism as we know it. I assumed that they would take that as a joke because my knowledge of economics and finance runs from about negligible to invisible. Next thing I know, it's quoted in about 8 or 9 different places, because everyone was so upset at this point, nobody was checking out anything. It's just if capitalism as we know it, it's over with. And this was the beginning of a belief that the Depression number 2 is, as I call it, was sort of somehow the end of the world, but only as we know it. But in fact, almost all of those sayings about as we know it have to do with, they really are saying, we don't have as much money as we did. We're not taking as much risk. That was so much fun, taking those risks. Very few of them say anything else. But I do think there have been tremendous changes in the United States that have really not been remarked upon. Some would defy the imagination of a novelist. For example, what used to be called the sexual revolution in the United States today is the sexual carnival. It's a lurid carnival such as never been imagined before. I'll give you an example. I've written nonfiction, actually more nonfiction than fiction, and I've written fiction. But as a novelist, I have a problem. Fiction has to be plausible. Nothing else in the 21st century does. And for example, I gather that the name Paris Hilton is known here as well as in the US. Paris Hilton, of course, a beautiful so-called hotel heiress from the Hilton family. And Paris Hilton was at first what you'd call a bold-faced celebrity in the gossip columns. Then she was caught on a pornographic tape, which immediately spread throughout the United States on everybody's computer. Now, later on, down the road, she became the star of a $10 million reality show. Then I suppose you could make a novel out of this beautiful heiress who gets a $10 million reality show. Well, I don't know how you'd make it really exciting, but anyway, she gets this $10 million reality show. But I don't think any novelist would have been able to come up with what actually happened, which was that Paris Hilton got the television show for $10 million because she made a pornographic tape. Because she made a pornographic tape. And that's the general situation as I see it in the United States. I wrote a book, came out a few years ago. My good friend Paulo Rocco was good enough to publish it in Portuguese. He is in Rio, and I don't think he's here tonight. Wonderful man. Anyway, this was about a naive young woman from the mountains of North Carolina in the United States who goes off to a college that's like Yale, Harvard, Princeton, all rolled into one. It's better than any of them. And she has a very rude awakening because she wants, in her own mind, she's saying, I am living a life of the mind. I'm not going to be like my classmates who are always looking to get drunk or to drive fast cars or to going around having sex. She discovers from the very beginning that that's what this university is about, sex. And that's what all American colleges are about, with the exception of a few religious colleges. I mean, they're not officially about it anyway. Now, this book was received as either horrible, scandalous distortion of the truth at American universities, or it was taken as a realistic presentation, and that we should be shocked. In fact, I can't tell you how many parents came up to me after that book was published, and they would say, "Why didn't you write about such and such?" Well, I'll give you an example. I didn't make this practice up. I'm just telling you what she told me. She said, "I was there for Parents' Weekend at the university, and I had forgotten to give my son something I had brought for him before he went off for the night with his friends. So I went to his fraternity house, and I didn't hear, I couldn't see a sign of anybody. So I walked up to about the 4th floor, and I heard some voices. So I went to where the voices were, and this is what I saw. There were 20 young people, undergraduates, 20 boys who were stark naked. I'm sorry, 10 boys who were stark naked, and 10 girls on their knees in front of these boys. And they were having what is known, I don't know what, as a pump race. Now, I said, "Where were you when I was doing research on this book?" So what I'm saying is that even though I thought I was telling a fairly lurid story, it was nothing compared to what actually transpires. There used to be, even when I was growing up, there was an old saying, not a saying, like a, well, maybe a saying about if a boy was in love with a girl, or just simply has a lustful feeling for her, embracing and kissing her was called getting to first base. This is a baseball metaphor. Second base was heavy petting, feeling, groping, digital wandering, and what was known then as French kissing. Third base was fellatio, and home plate was going all the way. Now that has changed in our time. First base is now feeling, touching, groping, inserting, and it's now just called, instead of being called French kissing, it was a rather fancy name, it's just now called tonguing. That's first base. Second base is fellatio. Third base is going all the way, and home plate is being introduced. And this is by no means any sort of distortion. That's exactly what goes on. Everyone now feels, well, anything you do sexually is okay as long as you're not hurting somebody else. I mean, what's wrong with it? Well, what gives me a little bit of concern is, first of all, if you think of the 7 deadly sins, one of them is lust. Now, why is lust a deadly sin? It's because you expend your energy, your focus, you expend it on lust rather than some useful, in some useful way. But also, you are squandering a great opportunity. And as lust increases, the birth rate declines everywhere. There is no exception to this. The birth rate declines, and today, the birth rate in the major Western countries is terrible. William Tucker, one of my favorite American writers, a real contrarian, a maverick, wrote a piece recently in which he compared the sex lives of chimpanzees, gorillas, and bonobos, another type of monkey, to that of humans. The chimpanzees, the female will go at the equivalent of a great public park and kind of put their tails up in the air and see if anybody is interested. The gorillas aren't much better, and the bonobos are not much better. Humans historically have been much better. This essay ends with a sentence which I think will echo over time. No one's talking about it yet. He says, the last sentence is, sexual repression is what makes us human. Not a popular sentiment at this moment. But now, this is a tremendous change in a country like the United States, because as de Tocqueville, whom I would call the first of the sociologists, said about the United States when he came to the United States in 1830, he said, the United States is the most religious nation in the world outside of Islam. And I think that's probably still true. But the intellectuals, United States intellectuals in the Northeast, and so many of them are there, look upon deeply believing evangelical Christians as some kind of little devils who are there to keep the rest of us from enjoying life, and have a very negative influence through the rest of life. As a matter of fact, these evangelical Christians, I grew up among them. That's what just about everybody in the United States, or where I was, Richmond, Virginia, was one of these, if not evangelical, deeply. And even if they were atheists, they all went to church on Sunday, believe me. It was, now, a third huge change that has taken place is that these notions are being tossed aside right and left.
Você acompanhou a primeira parte da conferência O Espírito de Nossa Época, com o escritor e jornalista Tom Wolfe. Na próxima semana, acompanhe aqui na URGS TV a segunda parte dessa conferência. Obrigada pela companhia e até a próxima!